There comes a moment in life when you realize that holding on is not always an act of strength. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is release. Release the person you cannot change. Release the situation you cannot control. Release the words that were never meant to give you peace. Release the expectations that keep you waiting for someone else to become who you wanted them to be. But letting go does not mean that you stop caring. It does not mean you become cold. It does not mean you forget what happened. And it certainly does not mean that you lose yourself. True letting go means something much deeper. It means you stop allowing what is outside of you to control what is happening inside of you. Many people believe they need closure before they can move forward. They believe someone must apologize. Someone must explain. Someone must understand their pain. Someone must finally give them the answer they have been waiting for. But what if your peace does not require their permission? What if you can walk away without receiving an explanation? What if you can forgive without reconnecting? What if you can care about someone and still choose distance? This is where emotional detachment begins, not with indifference, but with awareness. You begin to understand that you cannot control how people behave, what they think, what they say, whether they stay or whether they leave. But you can control how much of your energy you continue to give to those things. And this is one of the greatest forms of inner freedom. Because every time you chase what is leaving, you abandon what is already within you. Every time you obsess over someone else's actions, you lose contact with your own direction. Every time you keep replaying yesterday, you give yesterday another piece of today. So perhaps it is time to stop asking, how do I make this person stay? And start asking, why am I afraid to let them go? Perhaps it is time to stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what can this teach me? You do not need to destroy your heart to protect your peace. You only need to stop giving your heart to things that continuously disturb it. Letting go is not weakness. It is the moment you realize that your peace is more valuable than your attachment. It is the moment you stop fighting reality and begin accepting what is. And when you learn to accept what you cannot change, something inside you becomes quiet. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop explaining. You stop reacting. And slowly you return to yourself. That is the real purpose of letting go, not to lose someone, not to forget the past, but to find yourself again. There is a difference between letting go and giving up, but many people confuse the two. They believe that if they release something, they have failed. They think that walking away means they were not strong enough to continue. But sometimes continuing is not strength. Sometimes continuing is simply refusing to accept reality. True strength begins when you understand what deserves your effort and what deserves your release. Letting go does not mean that you stop caring. It means that you stop allowing your attachment to control you. You can love someone and still let them go. You can value a dream and still accept that the path has changed. You can care deeply about an outcome and still understand that the outcome is not completely in your hands. Life constantly teaches us this lesson. People change. Circumstances change. Relationships change. Opportunities disappear. Plans fail. What once felt permanent can suddenly become temporary. If you build your entire identity around keeping everything exactly as you want it, life will constantly disturb your peace. The mind often creates suffering by saying, this must happen. This person must understand me. They must stay. They must apologize. Things must happen according to my plan. But life does not promise that. And the more you demand certainty from an uncertain world, the more tension you create within yourself. Letting go is the willingness to stop fighting what has already happened. It does not mean you approve of everything that happened. It does not mean you ignore your pain. It means you recognize that fighting the past cannot change the past. You can learn from it, you can grow through it, you can become wiser because of it. But you cannot go backward and rewrite it. Your power is not in controlling yesterday. Your power is in deciding what you do with today. Sometimes we hold on because we are afraid that releasing something means admitting that it mattered. But something can matter and still come to an end. A chapter can be meaningful without becoming the entire book. A person can have an important place in your life without having a permanent place in your future. This understanding changes everything. You stop measuring your strength by how long you can endure something and begin measuring it by how clearly you can recognize what is no longer serving you. There are moments when persistence is necessary. There are moments when you must keep walking despite difficulty. But there are also moments when the lesson is not to push harder. The lesson is to release your grip. Think about holding a rope tightly for hours. At first, you may believe that holding on demonstrates strength. But eventually, your hand becomes tired. The pain increases. Your energy disappears. The rope has not become more valuable simply because you are suffering while holding it. The same can happen emotionally. You hold on to an old conversation, an old relationship, an old mistake, an old expectation, and you convince yourself that because it mattered once, you must continue carrying it forever. But you are allowed to put it down. You are allowed to say, "This happened, but it does not have to define me." You are allowed to say, "I cared, but I will no longer chase." You are allowed to say, "I lost something, but I will not lose myself with it." That is not giving up. That is self-respect. When you let go, you create space. Space for clarity, space for growth, space for new experiences, space to hear your own thoughts again. Sometimes you cannot see what is waiting for you because your hands are still full of what you refuse to release. So ask yourself honestly, what am I still holding because I am afraid of who I will become without it? Maybe you are holding anger because it makes you feel protected. Maybe you are holding onto someone's memory because you fear loneliness. Maybe you are holding an old failure because you believe suffering proves that you cared. But pain does not have to become your identity. You can honor what happened without remaining trapped inside it. The goal is not to become someone who feels nothing. The goal is to become someone who feels deeply without being controlled by every feeling. That is emotional freedom. You let the emotion arrive, you observe it, you learn from it, and then you allow it to move through you. You do not have to react to everything you feel. You do not have to hold everything you experience. And you do not have to carry every person into every chapter of your life. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply opening your hand and allowing what is no longer yours to leave, while keeping your values, your dignity, your lessons, and most importantly, yourself. Emotional detachment is often misunderstood. People think that if they detach, they will become distant, uncaring, or emotionally empty. But true detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the ability to feel without allowing every feeling to control your behavior. You can care deeply about someone and still maintain boundaries. You can love someone and still refuse to lose yourself in their problems. You can understand someone's pain without making their pain your own. There is a great difference between compassion and emotional dependence. Compassion allows you to care while remaining grounded within yourself. Dependence makes your peace dependent on another person's actions, attention, approval, or presence. When someone is emotionally dependent, their mood rises and falls according to what others do. A message can make them happy. Silence can destroy their peace. Praise can make them feel valuable. Rejection can make them question their entire identity. This is not inner freedom. Inner freedom begins when you understand that another person's behavior does not have to determine your internal state. This does not mean becoming indifferent. It means becoming conscious. You begin to observe your emotions instead of immediately obeying them. When someone disappoints you, you notice the disappointment. When someone ignores you, you notice the desire to chase them. When someone criticizes you, you notice the impulse to defend yourself. But instead of immediately reacting, you create space between what happens and what you choose to do. That small space can change your life, because when you react immediately, you often act from emotion rather than wisdom. You send a message you later regret. You say words that cannot be taken back. You make decisions based on temporary anger. You chase people who are already walking away. You explain yourself to people who have already decided not to understand. Detachment gives you the ability to pause. And within that pause, you regain yourself. You begin asking, does this deserve my energy? Not everything does. Some people want a reaction. Some situations create unnecessary drama. Some arguments are designed to continue forever because neither side wants understanding. They only want to win. If you participate in every emotional battle around you, you will eventually become exhausted. Your peace requires boundaries. You can listen without absorbing. You can understand without agreeing. You can forgive without returning. You can love without chasing. You can walk away without hatred. This is what it means to detach without becoming cold. Coldness says, I do not care. Detachment says, I care, but I will not destroy myself trying to control what I cannot control. That distinction is powerful. You do not need to shut your heart to protect it. You need to strengthen your mind so your heart is not controlled by every external event. Imagine someone constantly bringing chaos into your life. Every conversation becomes an argument. Every interaction leaves you mentally exhausted. Yet you continue returning because you believe caring means tolerating everything. It does not. Sometimes caring about yourself means creating distance. Sometimes the most peaceful response is silence. Sometimes love requires boundaries. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do for a relationship is to stop forcing it to become something it is not. Detachment also means releasing the need to control how others perceive you. You may explain yourself perfectly and still be misunderstood. You may treat someone with kindness and still be judged unfairly. You may do everything correctly and still not receive recognition. If your peace depends on everyone understanding you, you will spend your life trying to manage other people's opinions. Let them misunderstand you when necessary. You know your intentions. You know your values. You know the person you are becoming. You do not need to enter every courtroom where someone has decided to judge you. Your energy is precious. Spend it carefully. The stronger you become internally, the less you feel the need to control external circumstances. You begin to recognize that peace does not come from making everyone behave correctly. Peace comes from learning how to remain centered regardless of how others behave. This is emotional maturity. It is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming less controlled. You still feel love. You still experience sadness. You still care about people. You still become disappointed. But you no longer allow those emotions to decide your worth or dictate every action. You become like still water. The world may create movement around you, but you do not have to become the movement. You can remain present without becoming consumed. You can remain compassionate without becoming attached. You can remain open without becoming vulnerable to every form of chaos. And when you finally understand this, you realize that emotional detachment is not about building walls around your heart. It is about building enough inner strength that you no longer need walls to protect your peace. There are things in life that hurt us once, and then there are things we continue to hurt ourselves with by refusing to release them. The original pain may have happened yesterday, last year, or many years ago. But every time you replay it in your mind, you bring a piece of that pain back into the present. You cannot always control what happened to you, but you can decide whether you will continue carrying it. The mind has a strange habit of returning to what caused pain. It repeats conversations. It analyzes someone's words. It imagines different outcomes. It asks what could have been done differently. It searches for an explanation that might finally make everything feel complete. But sometimes there is no explanation that will satisfy you. Sometimes the person who hurt you will never understand the damage they caused. Sometimes you will never receive the apology you deserve. And this is where letting go becomes necessary. You cannot build a peaceful future while constantly living inside an old wound. Holding onto anger can feel powerful because anger creates the illusion that you are still protecting yourself. You tell yourself, I will never forget what they did. But remembering a lesson and carrying resentment are not the same thing. One makes you wiser. The other keeps you emotionally connected to the person or situation you are trying to escape. You do not have to forget what happened. You simply have to stop allowing it to control who you become. There is a difference between remembering pain and living inside pain. Remembering says, this taught me something. Living inside it says, this is who I am because of what happened. The first creates growth. The second creates imprisonment. Perhaps you are still holding on to someone who no longer holds on to you. Perhaps you are holding on to a relationship because you remember how beautiful it once was. Perhaps you are holding on to an old version of yourself because you are afraid that changing means losing part of who you were. But life is movement. What was right for you once may not be right for you now. People grow apart. Priorities change. Circumstances shift. And sometimes the most painful thing to accept is that something can be meaningful and still be finished. You do not need to turn something beautiful into something bitter simply because it ended. You can appreciate what it gave you and still walk forward. You can say, I am grateful for what this chapter taught me, but I am not going to live in this chapter forever. This is how you reclaim your energy, because every time you hold on to something that hurts you, you give it space in your mind. You give it attention. You give it emotional energy, and energy is limited. The more you spend on what has already ended, the less you have available for what is still possible. Ask yourself what you are carrying that no longer belongs in your life. Maybe it is resentment. Maybe it is guilt. Maybe it is the need to prove someone wrong. Maybe it is the desire to make someone regret losing you. Maybe it is an old failure that you continue using as evidence that you are not good enough. Whatever it is, understand this. You do not heal by constantly touching the wound. You heal by allowing yourself to move beyond it. Forgiveness can be part of this process, but forgiveness does not mean saying that what happened was acceptable. It means refusing to allow the past to control your future. You can forgive someone without inviting them back into your life. You can release resentment without removing your boundaries. Sometimes forgiveness is not something you give to another person. It is something you give yourself. You give yourself this permission to stop carrying the weight. You give yourself permission to stop asking why. You give yourself permission to stop waiting. And you give yourself permission to live again. There will always be things you cannot change, words that were spoken, doors that closed, people who left, opportunities that disappeared, mistakes that cannot be undone. But your life is not over because one chapter ended. The strongest people are not those who never experience pain. They are those who learn how to transform pain into wisdom without allowing it to become bitterness. So do not hold on to something simply because you once loved it. Do not hold on to anger simply because someone hurt you. Do not hold on to guilt simply because you made a mistake. And do not hold on to the past simply because it is familiar. Sometimes you must open your hand, not because what you held was meaningless, but because you understand that carrying it any longer is preventing you from becoming who you are meant to become. Your peace begins when you stop asking the past to give you a different ending and start giving yourself permission to create a different future. There is a point in life when you realize that you have been giving too much of yourself away. Not necessarily through physical effort, but through your thoughts, your attention, your emotions, and your constant need to understand what other people are doing. You may spend hours thinking about someone who rarely thinks about you. You may wait for a message, replay a conversation, wonder why someone changed, or imagine what you could say to make them finally understand. Without realizing it, you are giving your energy to something that is no longer within your control. Your attention is one of the most valuable things you possess. Where your attention goes, your energy follows. If your attention is constantly focused on other people's opinions, reactions, choices, and behavior, you slowly lose connection with your own life. You become an observer of everyone else while forgetting to live your own experience. This is why returning your energy to yourself is so important. It begins with asking a simple question. What is actually within my control? You cannot control whether someone respects you. You cannot control whether someone stays. You cannot control whether someone understands your intentions. You cannot control whether another person apologizes, changes, or recognizes your value. But you can control what you do next. You can control whether you continue chasing. You can control whether you continue explaining. You can control whether you allow someone else's behavior to determine your mood. And you can control where you place your attention. This does not mean becoming selfish. It means becoming responsible for your own inner world. Many people spend their lives waiting for external validation. They want someone to tell them they are enough. They want someone to recognize their effort. They want someone to admit that they were wrong. They want someone to finally see their value. But when your sense of worth depends on another person's recognition, you have handed them control over something that should belong to you. Your worth does not increase because someone praises you. Your worth does not decrease because someone rejects you. You remain who you are. This is where inner strength begins. You stop asking, how can I make them value me? And you start asking, how can I value myself more? That question changes the direction of your life. Instead of checking who noticed your absence, you begin building a life you are proud to return to. Instead of wondering who is talking about you, you focus on what you are becoming. Instead of trying to prove that you were right, you focus on becoming wiser. Instead of chasing closure from someone else, you create closure through your own acceptance. This is how your energy returns. You begin investing in your health, your discipline, your goals, your relationships, your learning, and your peace. You stop spending entire days analyzing things that cannot be changed. There will always be people who misunderstand you. Let them. There will always be people who do not recognize your effort. Let them. There will always be people who choose to leave. Let them go if they must. Your responsibility is not to convince everyone to stay. Your responsibility is to remain faithful to yourself. Sometimes you are exhausted, not because life is too difficult, but because you are mentally carrying too many people who are not carrying you. You are carrying their opinions, their expectations, their emotions, their decisions, their mistakes, their absence. And eventually there is no energy left for yourself. Put the weight down. You do not need to solve every person's problem. You do not need to respond to every opinion. You do not need to explain every decision. You do not need to chase every relationship. You do not need to earn your right to exist peacefully. Return your attention to the present moment. What can you improve today? What can you learn today? What can you create today? Who can you become today? These questions bring your mind back from places where you have no power and place it where your power actually exists. This is not about ignoring people. It is about refusing to abandon yourself while trying to keep everyone else happy. Because there is a quiet form of self-betrayal that happens when you constantly prioritize everyone else's needs while ignoring your own. You say yes when you want to say no. You stay when you know you should leave. You remain silent when your boundaries are being crossed. You chase people who have stopped meeting you halfway. And eventually, you wonder why you feel empty. Your energy must have a home. Let that home be you. Let your attention return to your own path. Let your mind become less occupied with who stayed, who left, who approved, who criticized, and who misunderstood. You have a life to live. And the moment you stop spending your energy trying to control other people's choices, is the moment you begin using that energy to build a life that no longer requires their approval. That is when you stop chasing peace outside yourself and begin creating it within yourself. There comes a time when you must decide what is more important to you. Being right, being understood, being accepted, or being at peace. Many people spend years choosing emotional chaos without realizing that they have a choice. They argue because they want to prove their point. They react because they want to defend themselves. They hold grudges because they believe anger protects them. They chase people because they fear losing them. But every reaction has a cost, and sometimes the price of involved in unnecessary chaos is your own peace. Inner peace does not mean that your life will become free from problems. It means that problems no longer have complete control over your mind. You understand that difficult moments are part of life, but you do not have to invite every difficulty into your inner world. Someone can be angry with you without you becoming angry with yourself. Someone can misunderstand you without you spending hours trying to change their opinion. Someone can reject you without you rejecting yourself. Someone can leave without you believing that you are incomplete. This is the foundation of emotional strength. You begin to recognize that not every situation deserves a reaction. Not every argument deserves your voice. Not every accusation deserves an explanation. Not every person deserves access to your emotional energy. There is power in choosing silence when your words would only create more conflict. There is power in walking away when staying would only deepen the chaos. There is power in saying, I do not need to participate in this. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become selective. A weak mind reacts to everything. A trained mind observes first. Before you respond, you pause. Before you speak, you ask whether your words will create clarity or simply create another battle. Before you make a decision, you ask whether the decision comes from wisdom or from temporary emotion. That pause is where self-mastery grows. Emotions are real, but they are not always instructions. Anger may tell you that something feels unfair, but anger does not always tell you what action is wise. Fear may tell you that something feels uncertain, but fear does not always mean you should run. Sadness may tell you that something mattered, but sadness does not mean you must remain attached to what is gone. You can feel an emotion without becoming the emotion. This is how you begin protecting your peace. You stop allowing temporary feelings to make permanent decisions. You stop sending messages in moments of anger. You stop making promises in moments of excitement. You stop ending relationships in moments of frustration. You learn to wait until the mind becomes quiet enough to see clearly. Sometimes peace requires distance. If a person repeatedly brings confusion, manipulation, disrespect, or unnecessary drama into your life, you do not have to keep proving your loyalty by remaining available. A boundary is not hatred. Distance is not revenge. Silence is not weakness. Sometimes distance is simply wisdom. You can wish someone well without allowing them to disturb your life. You can forgive someone without trusting them again. You can love someone without remaining close to them. You can understand someone's behavior without accepting it. This is the balance between compassion and self-respect. The world will always contain noise. People will have opinions. Some will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. Some will try to provoke you. Some will expect you to react. But you are not required to respond to every invitation into chaos. Your peace is your responsibility. If you constantly give other people the power to determine whether you have a good day or a bad day, you are living according to their behavior rather than your own values. Take that power back. When someone provokes you, breathe. When someone disappoints you, pause. When someone leaves, allow them to leave. When something ends, accept the ending. When you cannot control the situation, control your response. This is not weakness. This is discipline. The strongest person in the room is not always the loudest person. Sometimes it is the person who could react but chooses not to. The person who could argue but chooses peace. The person who could seek revenge but chooses to move forward. That person has understood something important. Peace is not something you find after every problem disappears. Peace is something you practice while problems are still present. You learn to carry yourself calmly through uncertainty. You learn to release what you cannot change. You learn to protect your attention. You learn to walk away from unnecessary conflict. And slowly, you become less available for chaos, not because you are afraid of it, but because you no longer need it to feel powerful. Your power comes from within. So choose your peace. Choose the quiet mind over the endless argument. Choose acceptance over resistance. Choose self-respect over approval. Choose growth over revenge. Choose your future over your past. Because there will always be something trying to pull you into emotional chaos. But the moment you understand that your peace is more valuable than your reaction, you become free to walk through the noise without allowing the noise to become who you are.